Now, imagine being involved in an accident, you are rushed to a hospital, you get medication, and you are still sick. The doctor changes your medication, but still no improvement. This is the reality for millions of people across the globe who develop antimicrobial resistance, popularly known as AMR. And while science has made strides, AMR is making infections harder to treat. And sometimes other routines and medical procedures and treatments such as surgery, caesarean section, among others, have become much riskier for those who develop resistance. Tonight, as we celebrate the International Women's Day, we shed light on the work of Dr. Sylvia Omulo, who has been studying antimicrobial resistance in communities to better understand what drives resistance and how it can be better mitigated.
Across continents, bacteria are evolving faster than the drugs designed to stop them. Antimicrobial resistance is rising quietly, eroding a century of medical progress, and scientists warn it could become one of the leading causes of death worldwide within a generation.
Take an example of what happens during an accident. You are perfectly fine, you fell on a motorbike, you broke a limb, went into a hospital because of resistant bugs in the environment. They got into you. Now you have a septic infection. You're running fevers. You pass out every once in a while. They use antibiotics. But if whatever infected you cannot be treated by those antibiotics, you end up dying of a resistant infection, not dying of the accident. But it's recorded as this person had an accident and died.
Antimicrobial resistance, or AMR, happens when microbes like bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites evolve to withstand the medicines meant to destroy them. In Kenya, Dr. Sylvia Omulo is confronting that threat at its source. An assistant professor and a public health researcher, Dr. Sylvia studies how drug-resistant bacteria spread long before patients reach hospital beds. In Kibera, her field site is alive with a team on the ground steadily monitoring how resistance is evolving in the community. I joined them as they set out to collect samples.
And from the studies we've done before, we found that a lot of people within this environment or within this community carry these resistant bugs in their guts. And the ones we track are among WHO priority bugs. So the question is why? What is it that predisposes this population to these bugs? And part of that is what we are monitoring here.
In Kibera, exposure is woven into daily life. A man quietly washed carrier bags destined for the market.
So for him, washing carrier bags is a way to clean them. But he doesn't understand that these same waters that he thinks he's using for cleaning could actually be a potential risk for the people that will use these carrier bags eventually. And so that's why the linkage with community advisory boards or leaders within the community become very important. So once we get our findings, we schedule either quarterly or biannual meetings with community leaders. They're called the Community Advisory Board, and we give them back these results just so they start helping us sensitize their communities that these waters are risky. And we see a lot of them being used for things like vegetables, being used for mainly foodstuffs. So for someone who looks at the bag and does not know where the bag has been, that's potentially an immediate risk that they are not aware of.
Much of the world's research on antimicrobial resistance unfolds inside hospitals where infections are already severe and treatment options are narrowing. Dr. Sylvia Omulo chose to begin earlier, tracing the problem back to the communities where it quietly begins. In Kibera, she and her team began studying people who are not sick, collecting samples from households to understand what healthy individuals were already carrying.
I sought to focus on the community because it was an underrepresented part of the antimicrobial resistance story, yet people come from communities before they go into hospitals. So understanding what are the drivers at community level became an important factor, but not just quantifying what is in the community and how much of it is circulating, but what is really driving the emergence of antibiotic resistance in community.
When Dr. Sylvia Omulo began examining what was driving resistance at community level, she wasn't looking for dramatic misuse, she was looking for patterns, the everyday habits that quietly shape how bacteria evolve. In Kibera, one pattern stood out.
We found that in Kibera, a lot of people use just 2 antibiotics, amoxicillin and metronidazole. Everything else is really at very low levels. Now, amoxicillin is because it's widely pervasive. People know it. Everyone talks about it. Even if I asked you today about an antibiotic, it's more likely than not you'll think about amoxicillin or penicillin, ampicillin, any cillin. Yeah, but in hospital that is very different. So that was one key distinction we found, that the problem is not all antibiotics. It is a select number of antibiotics that are commonly used in hospital, in community settings. And most people said that, yeah, maybe the first time they got this was from a hospital, they used it, they felt better, then they kept the antibiotics, and then later went back to them when they experienced similar symptoms. So that's a common theme you get to hear in informal settlements.
To understand what this meant and how resistance might already be circulating, her team analyzed samples collected from households across Kibera.
And so some people carry MRSA in their mucosal membrane. And our question was why? So that was one of the colonizing bugs we were looking at. Then in the gut, we were looking for the likes of ESBL. It stands for extended spectrum beta-lactamase producing bacteria. And that's also how we characterize antibiotics. The antibiotics that target narrow spectrum infections, or there are antibiotics that are considered narrow spectrum. So they focus on a few bacteria, then extended spectrum can target multiple bacteria because of the mechanism in which they act when they get into the body.
MRSA and ESBL producing bacteria are among the pathogens the World Health Organization has flagged as priority threats because of their growing resistance to antibiotics.
The surprise was that 1 in 2 people carry these resistant bacteria. And not just that, but it appears that people who live in households where they say they also keep poultry have a higher chance of carrying this bacteria than people who don't keep poultry. The other group that we found had a higher risk of carrying this bacteria were people who said they had been to a healthcare facility. And so the question was, what is it about poultry and what was it about healthcare facilities that predisposed people to this risk?
Nearly half of those studied were carrying resistant organisms without showing any symptoms. To understand whether these bacteria persisted over time, her team began following women in the community, collecting samples every 2 weeks.
And for some women, you'd find that in 6 to 9 visits, they carry these bacteria in their urinary tract. Now, the urinary tract is not the normal place you'd find these bacteria, because normally when you find them there, they're responsible for urinary tract infections. But these women have no symptoms, meaning they're colonized with these bacteria and they have been colonized for a long time. So it tells you something about maybe their immune systems have learned to live with these bacteria in a way that would not be possible for you and I.
Dr. Sylvia and her team persist in tracking superbugs despite a global funding climate that is steadily squeezing the resources needed to confront them.
We are lucky we didn't lose funding immediately, and that is because AMR is an important global issue. What it has done, though, is we are uncertain about whether we will continue getting funding. And for those of us who live and who work in these communities, that presents a challenge in itself, because we are the people that some of these communities look up to for hope. that our findings will help them later, will help direct the government on where it needs to invest a lot of resources.
But also on the brighter side, you've been able to secure sizable grants, you know, at a fairly young age, something that a lot of researchers have struggled with.
Yeah. That speaks a lot to mentorship. Now, I've been privileged to have studied in the UK for my master's and in the US for my PhD. And a common theme in those education settings is a strong aspect of mentorship. Now, what is this mentorship? Mentorship is not knowledge transfer. It is nurturing specific skills, teaching people how to think critically, how to truly be scientists.
It's interesting. It's now her turn. Dr. Sylvia Omulo is investing in the next generation, mentoring young researchers so they can win funding and find their footing in a competitive scientific world.
The way the world is moving right now, every country or countries seem to be closing in on what benefits their people. They're keeping their resources locally. What will happen to Africa, which has for a long time depended on these resources? If we don't step in and help our people, no one will. We'll go back to ages where we're struggling with simple infections or simple conditions that we had long past.
Her work stands as a powerful example of how women are shaping solutions to some of the world's greatest challenges. For the Frontera Media Group, I am Anne Mawafe.